is no man to take lightly. General Scott, head of the entire U.S. Army, had demanded a briefing as preparation for acting on a request from President Abraham Lincoln. According to the president's instructions, Scott was to listen patiently to the salvage master. He was not to dismiss any of his ideas as out of hand. Once the two of them came to a working agreement of some sort, they were to come together to the White House. Receiving his visitors on a crisp evening in February 1861, the lanky chief executive was thrilled by their joint report. Scott had consisted to the idea of having Eads build for the Army a fleet of armored steamers designed to give federal forces complete and permanent control of the Mississippi and its major tributaries. Like the commander-in-chief, General Scott was convinced that the coming war would have to be won in the West. Shrewdly, Lincoln had bypassed top Navy officials. He knew they would never consent to plans for an armored vessel designed by a self-taught salvage master, not a veteran shipbuilder. James B. Eads was so enthusiastic that he almost danced when Lincoln indicated his proposal of the tentative plans developed in conversation with General Scott. "Mr. President," he cried, "you'll have your turtlebacks in 100 working days, and that's a solemn promise." On the long journey back to St. Louis, the successful inventor, whose schooling had ended at age 13, made a series of sketches. They became the basis for working drawings that called for the production of 8 armor-plated steam-powered gunboats. Each vessel was to be 175 feet long and just over 50 feet at the beam. Plates of armor bolted to the bows were to overflap enough to hold against head-on fire. In order to deflect enemy broadsides, the sides of the queer ships were to be sloped at 35 degrees. Since they were designed specifically for river use, it was hoped that they would draw no more than 6 feet of water. Their bizarre appearance produced the nickname Turtleback. 2 weeks after returning to his home base in St. Louis, Eads had 4,000 men at work. 45 days after her keel was laid, the armored St. Louis was floated. Her boilers and engines were already in place, but the 13 guns she was to carry were not yet finished. In just under 100 days, the salvage master managed to build 7 of his strange gunboats and to convert 1 of his wrecking boats into an 8th. By the time the inland Navy was ready for action, Confederates had made good use of Island Number 10, about 60 miles below Columbus, Kentucky. Batteries constructed there, augmented by guns mounted on bluffs, were designed to block the lower Mississippi to federal traffic. Gunboats of the Eads built Navy were manned chiefly by volunteers from the U.S. Army. But once it was seen that the vessels were going to be put into use, the Navy assigned veteran officers for their quarterdecks. That is how Virginian-born Henry Walkie, who'd started his naval career as a midshipman in 1827, came to be put in charge of Eads' Carondelet. To an extent that few Army leaders liked to admit, the Carondelet contributed to Union victory at Forts Henry surrender Island Number 10, along with 3,500 men and huge quantities of ordnance. That meant the Mississippi River was open as far south as Fort Pillow, Tennessee. Within a few months, the Inland Navy had won victories that put federal forces in control as far as Vicksburg. For practical purposes, Eads' strange boats had cut the Confederacy in two. Their early engagements at Forts Henry and Donelson had taken place before